New location. Wow. No, we're just gonna talk about movies. So we're gonna talk about three different films from three different parts of the world, and we're gonna talk about how they're all interconnected with each other through the theme of corruption. But we're also gonna talk about how they're individual and different. This all relates to the idea of global cinema, where films from all across the world can relate to each other and can be interconnected with other films from different parts of the world, while these films individually retain their cultural identities and their individual stories. It's a fascinating idea. Hopefully, I explain it well enough. But yeah, let's get into it. We're going to talk about three areas of film, so three cinemas: Asian cinema, African cinema, and Caribbean cinema. For Asian cinema, we're going to talk about the movie Lagaan, which I talked about before. It's made in 2001, directed by Ashutosh Gowarikar. It follows the story of Indian villagers playing a game of cricket against British occupiers in order to get the tax rate down, and there's a lot of injustice in there. Then for Caribbean cinema, we got The Harder They Come by Perry Hunzel, directed in 1972, 1973, I think, and it follows the story of Ivan in the big city and how the big city is both culturally rich and also corrupt and very predatory in nature to people of the lower class. Then for the African cinema, we're going to talk about the movie Saworoide. I hope I said that right. Directed by Tundi Kalani in 1999. It follows the story of a king in Jogbo, the fictional country of Jogbo in Africa, and how his actions directly harm the people. So, let's get straight into it. First, let's talk about him individually and how we can see the theme of corruption in each movie. In the film Lagaan, we see this with Captain Andrews, who's the main antagonist. He oversees the area that includes the Indian village that we take place in, and he decides to double the tax for no good reason other than sort of his ego, just to have fun. He's a very sadistic character. And while there's a lot of overreaching themes of neocolonialism and resilience, the theme of corruption is still present if we look hard enough. At the 21-minute and 52-second mark, we see Andrews eating a meal with the King of India, I think. He's just a king. He's a local king. He's cool. And after the king declines to eat meat that was offered to him because of his beliefs, Andrews forces him to increase taxation on the villagers out of spite. Now, this taxation had no good reason. There was no economical gain. There was no reason to do it that was beneficial to anyone. Andrews did it for his own self-interest and for his own ego. This is a corrupt action in it of itself, because corruption involves abuse of power. And we see how Andrews abusing this power is going to directly harm the people who justifiably get outraged by this. We see this action, and we see how it sort of gets the people together, and the movie's messaging about the theme of corruption, is that only through defiance and the power of will can this corruption be pushed away. This message is shown as the villagers being underdogs who unify through diversity and defeat the oppressors through a physical challenge. We see this towards the end of the film, starting at the 2-hour and 27-minute mark, and all the way through the 2-hour and 55-minute mark. We see how the final game sees the villagers struggling to unite, but also uniting and working together as a team, despite social class, and fighting against this oppressor. Now, this film is more than just corruption. It's about oppression, it's about resilience, and about defiance, but we do see that theme of corruption where Andrew's using his power in the worst ways possible. We see how Andrew's using his powers. We do see the theme of corruption where we see Andrew's using his power in the worst way possible, is negatively affecting the people and only serving his own self-interest. This is corruption in it of itself, and this movie is showing that you need to resist by unity through culture and spirit, through physical unity, through physical willpower, and through spiritual willpower. That is what this movie seems to be portraying as Asian cinema's version of corruption and how to fight back against it. Now, of course, there's a lot of different ways corruption can be presented in Asian cinema, but this is one where we see it in this film, and this is a very prominent Asian film. Now, moving on quickly to Saworoide from African cinema. In the fictional kingdom of Jogbo, already said it already, we have this king who comes in and he uses corrupt actions to gain more wealth and more power, and it directly harms the people. We do get more than one corrupt leader, but mostly the point is that this film portrays corruption through direct actions from the people of a nation. It shows that self-centered nature of most, if not all, government officials, from the king to the chiefs, will always infect everyone corruption will always infect all of those at the top, and it will serve to harm the people at the bottom. We see this early on at the 8-minute and 4-second mark to the 10-minute and 4-second mark, where Lapite, the king, refuses the rituals Jogbo performs to coronate a new king. This direct rejection of the ritual already shows that he is not interested in serving the people and serving the traditions of the nation. He's interested in serving himself. This is further elaborated on at the 23:52 mark to the 25:57 mark, where Lapite meets with the loggers who are definitely illegally logging and harming spiritual grounds and harming the people. And in this scene, Lapite blatantly ignores the needs of the people and the law in favor of his own self-interest, and agrees to allow the loggers to continue their unlawful behavior if he gets to take a cut, which does happen. This shows how Lapite directly is involved with corrupt needs and ignores the needs of the people. Similar to Asian cinema, we see how the leader or the authority using their power abusively is a sign of corruption, and how using it for their own self-interest, whether it be for ego and pride or self-gain and greed, we see how if this affects the people, if this harms the people, that is a corrupt act. It's not a good use of power, it's not a just use of power, it's an abuse of power. Now, African cinema does seem to portray corruption in a more different way than Asian cinema. At least in this film, we see it. We see that the resistance to corruption is only brought about by physical revolution and taking a direct action against corruption. It can be further seen that corruption cannot be forgiven and must be overturned and punished in order for the will of the people to be fully brought back. It's also seen that corruption comes from within instead of being an external force. In Asian cinema, we get Lagaan showing how British occupiers are the external force on the internal people, and in Saworoide, we see how the internal people in charge are the corrupt problem, and we see in Lagaan that there isn't necessarily forgiveness, but there is a defeat, and the victor doesn't exactly punish the loser, but they do stand above them. In Saworoide, we see that the victor destroys the corrupted loser, Lapite, Legata. We see this throughout the film. Now, for Caribbean cinema, In the Heart of They Come, you can see that these themes of corruptions are heavily apparent throughout. I've talked about this many times before, but we see this with Ivan's producer, who manipulates him and doesn't give him the right amount of money for the song he produced. That's at the 45-minute mark. He doesn't just exploit Ivan's vulnerability, but he also holds control over Ivan by deciding what does and what doesn't get promoted or even released by the studio. Again, we see that abuse of power as a sign of corruption, because he's only doing it for his self-interest. There are more signs of corruption in this movie. We see how at the 48 mark, we see how the detective blatantly colludes with drug dealers to continue illegal activities. We see how the higher authorities within a society, in Jamaican society, are sort of contributing to this problem of corruption and the abuse of power that will harm the people, and in this movie it's especially seen the lower class people. Now, this film's portrayal of corruption is very similar to Saworoide, much more than it is to Lagaan, but the end message, opposed to Saworoide, where Saworoide showed how spirituality and traditions and the people of a nation will overcome corruption, that even if it comes from within, we see In the Heart of They Come and Caribbean cinemas that corruption operates at the highest levels of society, and there seems to be no way out of it, that the people will always be at the whims of the higher powers that are corrupted and will abuse their power to get more financial gain or any kind of gain of any sort over them for their own self-interest. We see this where Ivan dies at the end of the film. This shows us that corruption and corrupt acts will lead to the death of the people, and it doesn't land on a positive note of resisting against it. It shows that there seems to be no way out of it, and leaves the interpretation open to the people of whether or not corruption is something to be fought against, or something to be that will exist and always harm the people. Caribbean cinema seems to be very, not defeatist, but very tragic in that sense, where it shows how corruption leads to this death, leads to this harmful nature to the people, and there is no sign of resistance. I already compared these three movies. We see how they're all different, and we see how each movie has their own individual aspects, but we do see how corruption is consistent, where a higher authority or someone with more power that is supposed to be helping the people and supposed to be contributing to the people's needs are abusing their power for their own self-interest, for their own needs, and just wants and greed in general, whether it be pride and ego in Asian cinema, wealth and greed in African cinema, or general wealth, greed, and also ego and pride in The Harder They Come. Harder They Come also has some signs of survival is as well, where people who are above another person on the social ladder are performing these actions to also just survive. There are many different versions of that, but yeah. Of course, there's going to be a ton of different messages throughout all of these movies, and a ton of different versions of these stories within these individual cinemas. But through these three films, we could see how these cinemas kind of understand corruption and show corruption and the theme of corruption. And we can see how they all interconnect while they still retain their individuality. They're very different films. They take place in different times. They take place in different areas. They have different messages. They have different themes that go along inside of them. But we do see how corruption is apparent throughout each of them, and how corruption always starts at the top and attacks the bottom. But we also see how corruption is different in each one. That's all the time I got. I hope you liked this video.